Welcome, everybody. I'm Sam Albrecht. I am the Director of the Office of Regulatory Oversight, and we are here for a Technical Advisory Committee meeting to discuss a permanent rule and the upcoming rulemaking hearing. This is a result of the emergency rule that was passed by the State Housing Board. While an emergency rule doesn't have to become permanent, they expire in 120 days. We thought there was enough merit in this rule to actually make it permanent. And so that's where we are today. I'm going to share my screen and I'll go through a fairly quick PowerPoint. Can you guys see that okay?
Awesome.
Sorry, when I share screen, I lose the camera view. Can you guys see that screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, so today's there we go. Give me just a second. I'm gonna rearrange some stuff. Okay, so basically, I think everybody here knows everybody. We do always make these publicly noticed meetings in case the public wants to join. I don't see any public members other than Tawny. Tawny, welcome. And then the rest of the members are all TAC committee members. I'll talk very briefly again about guidelines, overview, and scope, and then we'll talk, go into detail into that emergency rule and the changes in addition to the permanent rulemaking hearing that we have planned. We'll also, if we want to, visit a little bit more about future rulemaking and then wrap up. So I've introduced myself. I think most of the TAC members know everybody, but we do have a couple new guys, and I'm just going to pick on them real quick. Oh, we'll just go around the room real quick. Nate, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Nate. Everyone knows me.
Okay.
I'm so popular.
Charlie, what about you?
Yeah, this is my second meeting, but I'm Charlie Chupp. I'm the CEO of Fading West, and we do modular housing, mostly focused on attainable, affordable housing in the state.
Great. And Tim?
Yeah, Tim Page, City and County of Broomfield building official.
And Dean?
Yeah, Dean Dalvitt, principal of EV Studio, architecture and engineering team that specializes in offsite construction.
Great. And then Tawny, I think everybody knows you too.
I think so too, but I guess for the recording, my name is Tawny Payton. I'm the executive director for the Rocky Mountain Home Association. We represent the manufactured and modular home industry in Colorado.
Great. Well, thanks for joining. All right. So again, guidelines. This is when we actually, when we were doing tiny home discussions, we had an extra 15 or 20 public members. And just to be clear, this is a TAC meeting, and we will provide the opportunity for the public to raise their hand and give input on the rules as we were discussing them. And it actually was a very good process last year during the rulemaking to hear from industry and other stakeholder groups on how we could incorporate tiny homes into the program. So it worked out really well. Our controlling statute is 2432, 3301 through 3329, and then our administrative rules are 8 CCR 1302-14, and all the previous meetings are on the website. Today, we're only addressing that emergency rule as passed by the State Housing Board and as published in the Colorado Register. And we're only addressing Colorado law and Colorado rules. And in order to keep us moving, comments are best provided in, if you wanted to provide comments in written form, especially, which could be easily adopted by the team here to do the rules. So I wanted to step back and put the administrative, this section of our rules in context. And so in And we've always had 215, 215.1, and 215.2. But the new rule 215.3 is the one that we're kind of talking about how it fits in with this. And then as we did some more review on what we had talked about last time going into the Colorado Register, I thought this was useful to go back and take a look at 215. And then so we can do, we'll consider modifications to the standards or alternate materials and methods of construction. The Division of Housing will require that sufficient evidence or proof be submitted to support and substantiate the modification or alternate request. And then 215.1, the Division of Housing may approve any such modification or alternate, provided the Division of Housing finds the proposed modification or alternate conforms with the intent and purposes of the standards and is equivalent in sustainability, suitability, strength, effectiveness, durability, safety, and sanitation. And then 215.2 is the approval of any modification will be made in writing as required prior to commencing to the work in question. So that's the kind of the framework of where this new rule sits. This slide actually has the rule that was adopted by the State Housing Board. We did not have time to call a TAC meeting before that. So we came up with the rule where it's at the top part of your screen there for 215.3 emergency rule. After a TAC meeting, when we started to make it out, to consider it being made permanent, the TAC added a couple of sentences to the end of that exact same paragraph. And it says these units will be viewed as site specific in nature and may require going back to the factory for modification before being sold or moved to another jurisdiction. And these units will be owned by the local jurisdiction requesting the units, designated housing authority or designated nonprofit entity. And those were the concerns that the TAC had, and I added those rules at that point in time. And then we published them the next day. I had my deadline to submit them was to 11/15. I think we met on 11/14. Now, with that said, then we started taking a look at it, and I had several people within the division say, you know, there's some concerns that we have. And so as I had sent out in the previous packet or the packet for this meeting, we've kind of got a new staff recommendation, and I hope everybody has had a chance to read it. If so, let me read this, and then I'm going to jump to the rationale on why we made the changes we did. In the event that a local jurisdiction is declared a state of emergency and met the written request and evidence or proof submitted to support and substantiate the request as stated in Rule 215, and provided the Division of Housing makes the findings required by Rule 215.1, the division may, for a period of 180 days, allow modification to the standards or alternate materials and methods of construction. An additional 180 days may be requested in writing from DOH. Requests from the local jurisdiction should include a copy of the approved local jurisdiction codes and an explanation of the requested changes and any site-specific information. Requests will not be accepted that are more stringent than the current adopted codes and standards or less stringent than the locally adopted codes and standards. Structures will receive an emergency response unit insignia from the Division of Housing. And the reason what we made those changes is that we took out the references to state declared emergency. If needed, we'll work with the governor's office directly during a state declared emergency. There was concern about overlap of authority if we were overstepping our bounds on a state declared emergency without coordinating back with the governor's office who has declared that state of emergency. So we dropped that. So now it's local. Okay. We also took out the others next to the last sentence regarding the units being site specific in nature. As the manufacturers know, every unit is tied to a site specific address. That's Rule 4.17.4. I'm going to pause and add Amelia. And I am going to make her a co-host. So, like I mentioned, every unit already has a site-specific address. Units could go to locations with less stringent. Take that sentence out. Units will have a division insignia designating them as an emergency response unit. And then we took out the last sentence regarding ownership. Statutorily, we have no authority on who owns any factory-built structures. Ownership of the units is not within the scope of our statute. We can only regulate manufacturers, sellers, and installers. So we took that out. And then we added the language regarding the 180-day time period with an optional extension to avoid a scenario of a local jurisdiction at a broad and never-ending state of emergency that would impact, that they would request variances from us on that would impact our standards. Let's just say a city or a county says global warming is a state of emergency in our jurisdiction, and we want the state to enforce our 2024 IECC adoption. This just gives us the authority to say, yeah, no, that's not going to happen. We felt we already had that authority, but I think it's a little clearer by putting in this 180-day time period for a approval of units to be built for an emergency with another 180 days.
Sam, quick question.
Yes.
In that example, you used adopting a IECC would be a more stringent requirement, correct?
Yes, you're right. It would be.
And so, didn't this say in the previous statement that you can't put in something that would be more stringent?
You're right. We actually do say that in the rule. There are some other, and maybe that wasn't the best scenario to use, but we have had jurisdictions say that they have a sustainability requirement. And so I could foresee where we do not have a sustainability code that they wanted to wrap that up in a locally declared state of emergency.
So that statement that says you can't become more stringent would cover them not doing that. I'm not saying that well.
Not being able to do that. Right.
They wouldn't be able to do that. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. Sam, I had one comment on your 180-day wording on the previous slide.
Sure. I can go back to that. Bear with me just a sec. Okay.
Can you pull it up? Sorry.
It should be, oh wait, I gotta hit the share button. There we go.
So the part that I was confused with on the extension, obviously they can request 180 days, but then it says an additional 180 days may be requested in writing from DOH. So who are you going to request it from?
So we currently, anytime we make a code change, we automatically allow 180 days for construction plans to come in with the
Right, the old code, right?
So I tried to model it after that, is that it's good for 180 days. And then if you want another 180 days, say it's a longer standing emergency or you couldn't get.
Yeah, you can ask for that.
You can ask for another 180 days, just like you can ask for
and that's what I took
extension from any of the codes that we currently have.
Right, and that's what I took it as well. But
Yep.
I guess that the wording says that you will request it, not them. on the second 180 days.
Yeah, it seems like it should say requested in writing from the local.
Yeah,
Well,
180.
I will add that. That's a good clarification. May be requested in writing from the local addition to DOH.
Yes, correct.
Okay, I'll
That's
make
all.
that change.
Yep.
Thank you.
And I've got a question, but I see Tammy's hand up.
Tawny?
Tawny, sorry.
Thanks, no problem, Tim. I also have something that I think should be clarified. It's towards the bottom. It's the second to last sentence where it says requests will not be accepted that are more stringent than the current adopted codes and standards or less stringent than the locally adopted codes and standards. I think there needs to be a clarifier as far as just that, you know, there won't be any, you know, it won't be approved for anything less stringent than, and I apologize, I'm kind of struggling to find the language, but I just want to eliminate any confusion if the locally adopted codes are more stringent, because it looks like it could be and more stringent and less stringent.
Yeah, that's confusing to me as well, Tony. Thank you. You beat me to the punch on that. It's kind of a mutually exclusively worded statement. If a local jurisdiction has a more restrictive, let's say the local jurisdiction is on the 2021, states on 2018, you're at an impasse.
Correct.
Right. That sentence basically says you can't have anything but what we have as adopted. Because it says it can't go more restrictive, but then it's also not allowed to go less restrictive than their own.
Right.
If they want to go less restrictive than their own on a rule like this, why wouldn't we let them?
Well, and I thought that was the point of this, right?
Yeah.
But what it's saying is less stringent than the locally adopted codes, which the state may be less stringent, is the way I'm interpreting it. Like, what if the state is less stringent
Right.
than the locally adopted? Then it kind of creates some confusion there.
Right. So should we stop the sentence after requests will not be accepted that are more stringent than the currently adopted codes and standards, period?
Yeah, I think so.
Yes.
I think so.
Yes.
I think so too.
Yeah. Because if they want to adopt less stringent ones, that's the whole purpose of this.
Yeah, like that Denver scenario.
Correct. Right.
Okay.
And you can't say less stringent than their codes even because they're obviously looking at going below their code standards as well.
Yeah, they
Right.
are.
Yeah.
Or actually in this case, they're not, but or the case that this was designed for, but yes, I forgot that there are.
Yeah, that could be the scenario going.
Yep.
Yeah, right.
Good catch, guys. All right. Any other comments on the new language?
I've got two questions, sorry.
Okay.
Go ahead, Tim.
So one question is, and this actually adding the clarification for, well, two things, you know, where you can't have an unending state of emergency, which was some of the comments came up that I brought up last meeting on the Denver scenario with the homelessness being an ongoing state of an emergency, even maybe with a new mayor. So that takes care of that concern I had. The second part is putting a limitation on, which I agree with that from a logistics standpoint or an enforceability standpoint, I guess more. After, let's say if it goes 180 days and they are ability to get another 180, what happens at the end of 360 days or 180 days? Then that signia is invalid and they have to remove them, the units, or
No, the insignia and the insignia stays with the unit. It can't be removed. So
It's forever approved.
it's forever approved as an emergency response unit, and it's just the time frame for which the units can be built. And if I need to add that clarification in there, I could do that. But that's the way we do every time we do a code update, we don't take off the off the insignia and put a new ones on. So it's the same process, Tim.
Understood. So, but if the state of emergency expires, for lack of a better term, whether it's a flood, homelessness, whatever that might be, then say we've got 100 units in Broomfield that were approved to be put on site, and the state of emergency goes away. And we had these questions in that last meeting. I don't think it ever got resolved, but then what happens to the legality of leaving those in place for 5 more years or whatever that might be?
They can stay because they've been built to code, and then that's beyond my jurisdiction and authority to say those units are done, what's done with those units.
I thought
That's
the whole
up to
Am I-
local, depending on how they decide to use those units.
I think that at local jurisdiction level, you guys would have to then get comfortable with where you're going to allow them to go at that point. Because it's going to be up to your codes that allow them to go to other locations.
But they'd have to go to another, that's, I guess, kind
Yeah.
of the crux of my question is, can they remain in that site-specific location that it gets this insignia for?
I think from the state standpoint, yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I'd have to run that by my attorney's office. I would struggle with that. Because the concept is a short-term solution. So if it's a short-term solution, which is what this all started from with Denver, the 180 days and maybe another 180, then it could become a long-term, and then I'm not sure how the AHJ jumps in and says, sorry, you got to move these out because we're permitting them for the site. Yeah, that's, I'm sorry, I'm just rambling here.
No, Tim, you're not rambling, and it's a valid concern. So in the Denver situation, which I think is an extreme, I think Denver is always going to have a certain homeless program that they're trying to work with that community, right? They can keep their units there. They may close one of their locations. They may close and you know, if that land is eventually sold for some other purpose, those units will be removed and they'll either be mothballed. But before they could be reinstalled, they would have to come back to the state. And let's say Broomfield bought their units, right? You would then have to come back to us and we would take and say, hey, we'd like to buy these units. They've already got an insignia, but we'd like to install them to our local wind and snow load, right? And then we've already got all that information on file. But again, that's outside of my program for reuse. That's up to your state of emergency and your mayor and your county commissioners on how they want to use those things in the future. So the 180 days is not the limitation on the state of the emergency, which I have no authority over either. At the county, we did, let's say, for example, with COVID, we re-approved our state of emergency every 30 days, right? So that is up to the local jurisdiction to decide.
Okay, thank you.
Okay,
Charlie's got his hand up.
Charlie, please.
Thank you. Okay, question that I had was around the 180 days, 2 things. One is if the approval, if you're given approval for 180 days, then that means that after, you know, somebody comes to you and says there's an emergency, you approve it, you can build under this code for 180 days. Not many factories are going to be able to, well, maybe some site build people are, but factories are going to have a pipeline. So if you can only build for 180 days, there's a good chance that our pipeline's past 6 months right now. So and I think most factories could have longer pipelines. So I guess the question is it you can only build them and deliver them within 180 days, or you can submit orders, or like, what is that 180 days?
Is
So
it submit plan approval?
It's plan approval.
Plan approvals.
Yeah.
Okay, so once you get approval, we can build it even after the 180 days.
Yep.
Okay, great. Second question is,
And Charlie, that gives us the ability to say, okay, you know, for our plan review team, watch for these for the next 180 days or 360 days if we have to, right? And then after that, we need to revisit.
Okay.
Well, and also to add to that is once you get a plan approval, that plan approval is good for 1 year.
Yes.
So it could theoretically, you could be building them for up to 2 years.
Yeah. Well, 1 year, 364 days.
Okay.
Okay. So my second question is, I understand. I feel like I guess I don't know why the 180 days, it feels a little bit arbitrary because aren't we saying that we're going to define emergencies that can only be solved within a 360 maximum time frame? Like it seems like we're targeting a set of emergencies. What if there is
So
what if
there's
there's an emergency that lasts longer than that? And I feel like we're building a time frame in that's pretty arbitrary. We're defining a state of emergency as only a certain amount of time, not the scope of a potential emergency.
I don't disagree with you, and I guess I used the model that was already in the administrative rules for both plan reviews and for code changes, right? This is modeled on the code change process in that anytime we do make a change to the codes, folks have 180 days to utilize it, and then they can request another 180 days. So let's say manufacturer A provides the first set of units for this, but then manufacturer B wants to produce some a little bit later. This would allow that, right? If
What
we
if
take out the 180,
what if in the thing we said instead of an additional 180 days may be granted, we take out the and we just say additional 180 day extensions may be granted.
I'm
Well,
good with that. I was getting there too.
Well, let me. I guess my biggest question is this: is let's say that there is a time frame. Is to the Department of Housing be defining what a local jurisdiction defines as an emergency? And if that's that feels like we're stepping a little bit too far into knowing what's good for a community. Like if Telluride says we have a crisis of housing and we're going to go, they're in an existential crisis anyways with affordable housing. So if they say I have an emergency and it's going to take me 5 years to solve this, I guess why does the Department of Housing trying to define the scale and scope of a local jurisdiction's definition of what's critical in an emergency in their environment, in their community?
So that goes back to my original concern of allowing being driven. And I'm talking myself into circular logic here, and I've got to stop doing that. So I'm okay with changes to this. Would it be cleaner if I just took out that whole everything after the 2.15, take out of the division may allow for a period of 180 days for allow modification to the standards or alternate materials and methods of construction, and I could take out both of those. Would that make it cleaner?
Well, this is my opinion. I mean, others might disagree, but we deal with, affordable housing crises every day, and none of them are going to get solved in 360 days. Like if there's especially Denver's, homelessness crisis, that's no matter how many they order, they're not going to solve that in any kind of short time frame. And so I guess that would be a missional reason, but I think the more legal reason is if I'm a jurisdiction and I declare a state of emergency, should that be defined and limited by the Department of Housing if a community is saying this is an existential crisis for our community?
Like what I hear.
Yeah, I don't think it limits. I don't think my 180 days limits the state of emergency, right?
Right.
Because there are alternatives to use for housing in a state of emergency, right? They could be using pallet shelters. They could be using something else, right? So it's this is for factory built structures. It's the only authority that I have over manufacturers. And like I said, I've modeled it on what we have used in the past for code changes. But in a state of emergency, I'm not sure that really is as applicable as I thought it was when we wrote this.
I think the thing that we're guarding against, though, Charlie, on the flip side of that is I completely agree. We don't need to define how long a local jurisdiction's state of emergency is. But I think what Sam's trying to guard against is them if we don't put any bounds on it, they can use it to rewrite our codes at the Division of Housing for eternity in their local jurisdiction. They can just declare a emergency that's for 5 years, and these are the codes that we now require to, and then all of a sudden they effectively circumvent Division of Housing's authority on the codes for modular housing. And so I realize that we have to approve of their emergency, and I don't know what that process looks like, meaning like, I don't know who in the Division of Housing is going to determine if this is an actual qualified emergency or if they're just pulling something out of left field to declare one. I don't know how that process works in the Division of Housing, but that was the logic.
2.15 and 2.15.1 cover that, right? I mean, I think you've got.
There's a process there. I don't know what it is. Yeah, right. Yeah.
Well, and my only thought about that is that when you sticker this as an emergency unit, if a community does do it forever, they've got a lot of units that can't go anywhere else. They're only used for an emergency within that location. So they would be if
building up a problem. Yeah, right.
Yeah, they had 10,000 of them because they kept it in place for 10 years and they bought 1,000 a year and they got 10,000 of these things. They can't go put it someplace else. It's still used for the emergency that they intended the code change to address.
Fair.
It can't go anywhere else. So I guess my recommendation would be take that out, let the jurisdictions define the emergency, but you've got to control. It can't go anywhere else. You can't use this for other types of housing. Other people, if they move it, they have to get it rebuilt or
recertified or whatever. Yeah, right.
So just my thought. I know there's other opinions, but yeah.
I'd agree with that, Charlie, and to piggyback on that, I mean, it's not just a housing emergency, but I mean, we're still rebuilding in Louisville for fire. And if those were modular housing units intended to be permanent homes, it's still a state of emergency up there. So, why would that not qualify after 180 days? Because building out a community of hundreds and hundreds of homes is going to take more than 1 year. It's going to take
3-4 years.
3-4 years.
Right. Yeah.
And we're dealing with that right now. But I did want to clarify, I mean, while this particular rule obviously, is implied to apply to, some sort of temporary housing that might move around, it also applies to permanent housing forever, right? I mean, somebody can build an emergency unit and it could be on a permanent foundation that lives there for life, right? That's the intent of this piece.
Yeah, because it doesn't define what you can change and cannot change from a code standpoint.
And I say in that case, I mean, we need to make sure we remove any barriers of risk for using modular or a manufacturer to be able to put it on a line at any given time with any kind of date stamp, because that creates risk for all stakeholders involved. If they're not sure if they're going to get an extension after 180 days, then they might not even do the deal. Especially if it's like a partnership with a private sector company or something like that in a housing authority. Those guys are very sensitive to risk.
I mean, what if like the Louisville fire, Sam, like what if, there's a couple hundred homes that go, they adopt an emergency thing saying, hey, we're going to let you build houses to the 2003 IRC and the 2009 IECC.
Roll it back to when those homes were originally built.
4 years. Yeah, right. Maybe roll it back to when they were built or whatever. Like, that's what this can do. You okay with that?
I don't think that's what this would allow.
I think it would allow it from a technical standpoint, the way it's written.
But that's where 2.15 and 2.15.1 would come in place. I mean, they'd have to justify why they're doing it, and the board would have the authority to say, we're not.
Yes or no, right.
Would that be correct, Sam, as part of that process? So if Broomfield or Louisville came in and said, we want our proposal to do this through emergency is to allow these homes to be built 3 feet apart and back to the 2015 standards. Louisville kind of already did some of that from the code requirements, but I won't digress on that one. And then say, and we want to be able to use these for no time limit, because that's where I see this. It kind of answers my question from a little while ago, that the AHJ would be the responsible party for at the bottom line, how long they can be there. So when they're putting their proposal to the Division of Housing, that would be part of that request. And then along with that, what standards, but it can't go less than the Division of Housing, the state requirements also.
Right.
That's kind of the confusing part.
Yeah, and we have basically said that requests would not be accepted that are more stringent than the currently adopted codes and standards.
But they could go less.
But we're going
It
to
could be
take out
less.
or less stringent than locally adopted codes. I wonder if we should not, I mean, this was envisioned to help a local community with temporary emergency housing.
I thought it was for homeless, what for homelessness in Denver? Was that intended to be temporary or permanent?
It's temporary for Denver.
That's what started this whole thing.
Yeah.
That's what started this whole thing. Do we, we can debate whether to leave temporary in there or not, but do we need to be right up front and at the very top of that, say, in the event that a local jurisdiction has declared a state of emergency and needs emergency housing, and I'm not sure the exact wording of that, but wording is going to be important.
Probably temporary housing.
But man, temporary housing. Then now you define how long you can use it and you scrap all of it at the end of this time.
Yeah, right.
Use it anywhere else. Like it can't be temporary.
You wouldn't be
the units
buying
are
that.
built- The units are built to IRC, and maybe we don't say that they need housing, is that residents need temporary. I mean, because if you look at Denver's plan, it's not long-term housing for residents, it's transitional housing.
For them, but not the unit.
Yeah. Like,
Yeah,
let's-
for
like-
them,
like-
but not for the
yeah.
unit. You're
Right.
right, Charlie.
What this particular language allows for is to remove what could be a barrier to using offsite construction for a jurisdiction who does say roll back I mean, let's take Louisville, for example.
Yeah.
If they're saying, hey, we're going to allow these homeowners to go back to, some previous version of the code, why would the state bar offsite construction as an option for those individuals?
Agreed.
They only can go now to site built construction because they can't use offsite construction.
And at that point, it's not temporary anymore. It's the permanent solution for housing replacement.
Right. And the only reason why Louisville is doing that is because it's an emergency situation, right? So that is the barrier to making sure that a local jurisdiction can't just decide on their own in a non-emergency situation to roll back the codes and supersede the state. But this seems like a pretty important item in any kind of emergency situation, flood, fire, or housing emergencies. And I don't think it's limited to housing. I mean, I think this could go for commercial, retail, school classrooms. I mean, you name it.
So
What's
Dean,
it-
that's a really good point. If the locals want to roll it back,
It's an interesting thing is that sentence that we took out where we said and cannot be less stringent than local codes starts to apply with what Dean just said.
Mhm.
Right? Where if they're going to roll back their global code, then they can roll it back the Division of Housing to the same place, but they can't roll the Division of Housing back further than their local code. But maybe them rolling back their local code is more of a hurdle if they're trying to build emergency shelter housing than being able to just roll back the DOH code immediately with a single request. So maybe we want to allow that.
so the scenario we were dealing with when we were looking at this was that city and county at Denver wanted to allow factory built structures a piece of this, or to be able to provide some of the solution, right? They could have done it all with stick. They could have used their current codes and done it all stick built, or they could have purchased products that met their definitions of this RX structure that they had come up with, right? For transitional housing. Our intent was to allow statewide the ability for factory built structures, whether they're built in the state or out of the state, to be part of the solution in an emergency.
Sam, would you throw that that sentence up again, or that
Yeah.
phrasing?
That first slide, yeah.
Because I think this is there's lots of pieces to this, and what Dean said is we're trying to allow factory built structures within that can go through the Department of Housing for approval that still meet the local jurisdiction's new definitions under an emergency. Is that right?
Yep.
Okay, I stole smart things from Dean and something Nate said. So, so maybe the phrasing, maybe we need to think, is this phrased right? If that's what we're trying to do.
I think this is, I think if we change the thing where they can request an endless amount of 180-day extensions so that they have to continue to justify their emergency, and then take out the less stringent part,
Okay.
I think it's okay.
Okay. So
I'm good with that.
Yeah. So are you saying, Nate, that you would leave in 180 days and may request extensions as needed for the emergency or something?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Primarily just because we don't want somebody to be like, we're going to declare a 5-year. They can have a 5-year emergency if
They
they can
gotta talk about
justify
it.
a 5-year emergency, but they can't start out with a 5-year emergency. They got to keep up with it. It gives the Division of Housing touch points, from an extension standpoint.
How do y'all
And then
feel
I
about
would
that?
take out the less stringent part, because I do think it's important that if we require that they drop their global code before they can drop DOH's code, they might not be able to have access to a quicker form of emergency housing, because changing the code at the local jurisdiction sometimes might be quite the laborious process.
Well, but they can exempt that. They can do that in their state of emergency.
Is that the case for every single jurisdiction? I don't know the rules around that kind of stuff.
Yeah, the state of emergency says, we are going to suspend our local building codes and allow XYZ building
Okay.
codes in this specific area.
Okay.
And then they're adopted by the local emergency, and then we could be able to use them.
So so are you thinking about maybe leaving that sentence in, the less stringent than locally adopted codes, or taking it out?
That was I don't know. I'm on the fence, guys. What do you guys think?
Well, one question I have, just clarification, if there's a locally adopted code and they have to, the state approves our stamp drawings, it goes to a local jurisdiction, their permitting department still has to review it. Does that have any effect on this? I guess.
Not for the mods.
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's, fundamentally, the whole point of this is to level the playing field between offsite construction and any other mode of construction in an emergency situation, where current state is offsite construction could be more restrictive, take more time, cost more money than onsite stick frame, because stick frame is allowed to go with whatever local deliberations occur in an emergency situation, i.e. rolling back to the 2015 code or something like that, right? So I mean, if that's the goal of this, then we need to think more broadly about how that would be applied. If the goal of this literally is just to provide temporary shelter, well, then that's like an altogether different objective. But I'm in favor of leveling the playing field. I mean, the whole point of what this group should be doing is to make offsite construction equivalent in regulatory policy and code requirement and design and cost as stick frame construction in our state.
Right, because Dean, if the local stick built people don't have a 180-day revolving thing, if they declare an emergency, can't. So again, if that's the point, then take out the
The
not
180.
suggesting
Yeah.
this, but it sounds like you should take out the 180 days at all, because if they can declare an emergency and a stick built person doesn't ever have to justify or get approval, then
What if the approval is matching their state of emergency? Because I'm assuming when they come out with a state of emergency,
Right.
they put a timetable on it.
That's the fairest piece, although that's kind of implied, right? Because this is a state of emergency situation.
Right.
So if somebody applies and there's no state of emergency, then it's like, well, that's easy to deny.
Right.
right,
But like if
I'm not
they,
sure how long you can declare a state of emergency. I'm not sure how, under COVID, how long local jurisdictions did it. We did it every 30 days. I doubt that a 5-year state of emergency, in hindsight, looking at the Louisville Superior fires, maybe you could do that. But if you've got new management coming in, new mayor, new commissioners, I'm not sure you can.
I don't
find
think they can do it that
a-
long either. I just don't know. Because I remember when Johnston took over as mayor, he declared a state of emergency like really quick, but then he had a timetable where he had to re-up it. And so that I think is normal. I just don't know what those are.
Yeah, my general opinion is I think the discussion's kind of going beyond what Division of Housing is attempting to do here based on the emergency rule that's in place. I'm not going to disagree that on leveling the playing field, et cetera. Discussion has come up, but what I believe we're really trying to do is to allow statewide a local jurisdiction to be able to, if they have declared a state of emergency, to come up with a request to the Division of Housing to be able to provide short-term housing for that period of time and not forever. So I'd be totally against saying, well, you can just have these, forever, and they're less restrictive. I mean, to level the playing field, manufacturers can build and are building units that are equal to the code. And, I would say the stick builders would be saying, well, why do, and this, the questions came up in the last meeting. I think Nate was making some of these comments of, we'll just make them build the same way. I mean, the builders can do it. I'm just not sure where this is going, other than it's beyond just dealing with short-term housing needs that could be there forever. Like for Dean, I think your comment on Louisville is they just build them and they're permanent housing. That's not what I don't think we're dealing with or should be dealing with, in my opinion. I think it's kind of gone beyond the scope of what this thing started as, converting an emergency rule to a statewide rule.
So just to try to move us towards a conclusion, because I know Sam's got to actually get this thing published. I think going back to where I think we are, if we make it, you can apply for additional 180-day extensions. And then I think I would take out the less stringent. That's where I'd go.
I would agree. I think that those two things, if you allow it to be extended as required by the emergency on 180-day reviews, and you take out the less stringent, which is a confusing statement, I'd vote for that.
I think it works.
I'm good with that.
And so
Okay.
to clarify then, if Broomfield wanted to make this request and I came in and said, I want to make or allow these units to be built under, for example, you were talking about the Louisville, back to the 2015 codes and the energy code and not require fire sprinklers. Just
Yep.
for sake, and that would be in my request for a certain period of time to the
That would
Division
be
of
allowed.
Housing, and then Sam's group would review that and approve or deny. Is that for clarification?
Correct.
What that would end up allowing you to do here?
Yes, you could request that, Tim, but in a reality, we have to be very clear in 215.1 that it meets all those life safety requirements. If you're backing up all of the codes and there are life safety improvements that have been made, and I know a lot of the codes are in general life safety requirements, but we might say, you know, we're just not going to back down off the sprinkler requirements.
Sam, can I ask a question about that? Would that also affect the local jurisdiction if Tim made that rule in his area? Would that allow the local builder to build it without sprinkles, but require a modular builder to build it with sprinkles?
So, Charlie, that's a really good question, and I had another thought just as I answered Tim, and that is we don't currently the building codes and standards defer sprinklers to the local jurisdiction requirements. So if Broomfield, city and county of Broomfield said by the state, we want you to build to the 15 codes, and we are not going to require sprinklers for these units in this geographic area, then our manufacturers will not have to put sprinklers in them.
But I guess the question, let's make it another code.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, because the question is, local builders don't have to go to the Department of Housing to get approval. They go to local jurisdiction to get approval, right? So again, like,
Pick a different code set, like a different energy code set. If Tim says we're going to allow our state of emergency, we're going to allow everybody to build a 2010 IECC, and then they come to the Division of Housing with the same request, they go through 2.15, Division of Housing says, no, we really don't want to bend on that. We want you guys to build a 2021. Then Charlie's question is valid.
then a site builder can do it a different way than the modular builder has to do it.
But my gut is that Division of Housing, if that was, I don't. It's definitely a conversation at that point. Sam, would you agree? But I don't think you're going to do something like that.
Before we even got to the emergency rule, we had almost daily meetings with city and county of Denver building department to understand what they wanted and how they came up with their code set,
Right.
so that we could be comfortable with it. So we actually did that review of their code set, that 2.15.1 review, just to make sure that we were comfortable with everything before we agreed to the final construction drawings.
So Sam, if that's happening before that, can we take it out of this?
I don't want to take it out because it was just we had the capacity and the goodwill to do that.
That was an informal process.
It was an informal process. I'm trying to formalize it a little bit.
Okay.
So Tim, I think to answer your question, yes.
Yeah, the answer to your questions, yes,
Yeah.
Tim.
Okay,
All right. So we all agree, make 180 days extendable, and then take out less stringent.
Yes.
Okay, last question. This just has to
Okay.
do Title IX.
As long as it doesn't change anything, Charlie.
Doesn't change that. No more comments. Just a question on Title IX has some pretty interesting phrasing in it. Does this supersede Title IX requirements with state-funded projects?
No, I don't think it would I don't think it would supersede 9.
So what does that mean? Does that mean that they have?
There's so many units that are accessible.
Oh,
I
you
think
still
that would
you
apply
still
across
have
the
to.
board.
That's the accessibility title, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that'll stand.
Yeah,
So-
and that would equally apply to an on-site builder, so everything's on the same playing field. for
Same
them.
page.
Yeah.
So they can't request something that supersedes Title IX.
Primarily because Title IX doesn't have something like we're talking about instituting for our stuff. Is that they don't Title IX doesn't say that if they make a local emergency they can change Title IX. So Title IX
I
just
don't think-
always
yeah,
stands no
local-
matter what.
Local jurisdiction doesn't have the authority to change a state statute.
Correct. Yeah, right.
Okay, all right, just
We're kind of giving them authority to change it in a roundabout way through this for the other stuff.
okay.
And Sam, I just had a quick question here. It's more operational than it is to the language itself, but in all of this, I mean, if this is the state equipped to review documents that are under a different code than they're used to reviewing? I mean, does that extend review timelines? What's that process look like for the state? Because that feels like it's a little bit uncomfortable for, reviewers who've been reviewing 2018. Oh, now this like oddball thing that we've got to wrap our heads around. What's that look like for you guys?
So what we do logistically is we put the more junior plan reviewers on the stuff that's being submitted 2018. And we put our engineer on this.
Greg Audrey's awesome. Yeah.
So
And in no case does it give the local jurisdiction the authority to review on behalf of the state.
oh yeah,
No.
we coordinate it and say, hey, you guys with this plan set, and actually those plans have to be submitted to the locals anyway as part of the permitting process, right?
Right.
And so they've got it, we've got
But
it,
not for review. Just
but not for stamp and review, but
Yeah.
but we talk, right?
Mhm.
And so, yes, yeah, we can handle that. We actually bumped Denver stuff up because the mayor didn't give us a lot of time on this.
yeah.
Hey, Sam, if you ever want us to review and just approve our own drawings, just let me know, because
Okay.
we're willing to take that over whenever you need.
Appreciate that.
A lot
All
of
right,
giggling,
so,
a lot of giggling there, so
Yeah.
I think we're in good shape.
All right.
great.
All right, I have more slides if you guys just wanted to see the emergency response unit.
Not really.
Sticker, I'll show you real quick. That's what it's gonna look like.
Ooh, you even got stickers? How'd you get those so quick?
Money talks.
.com.
Man,
Nice.
we're gonna put more stickers underneath stuff and make it even more confusing for people.
That's right. All right,
Love it.
that's all I have, guys, and to be respectful of everybody's time, I'm ready to end the meeting.
I'm good.
Great.
Everyone have a great holiday, everyone.
All right,
Thank
thanks,
y'all.
everybody.
Good meeting. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
All right, I've turned off the recording. Thanks, everybody. Tim, we'll see you.